get started. So the first thing I'm starting with is a pencil. This is just a 4H, nothing terribly exciting. It's a hard pencil. I like hard pencils. And I always give myself a shape in which to paint. The reason I do this is I'm totally fine with some handicaps in helping myself be a better artist. And for me personally, drawing a basic circle really helps. So I'm going to do a few different kinds since we're doing some examples with a few different angles here. The next thing I do is sometimes I will give myself where my center is, because that's going to help with my perspective quite a bit. And then we're going to go in with our paintbrush. I'm actually going to do a few different types of circles. Well, a few different circles because we're going to do a few different types of 5 petals. There we go. So normally I would do this much lighter and then go through with an eraser afterwards, but we're not going to do that today because otherwise you guys can't see it. All right, so the first 5 petal I'm going to start with has pointy petals. It's not my favorite. We're going to do my favorite a little bit later. But I tend to focus my floral creations on negative space as well as painted space. So that being the case, when I paint petals, I typically don't paint them in one stroke. I typically like to build them with multiple strokes. So for example, I'm going to give this guy like a nice little point. I'm gonna make my yellow a little bit darker for you. So we could just do petals like this all the way around. I find that tedious, boring, and a little bit like daisies, and I absolutely loathe daisies. So we're not gonna do daisies. And then I come in with a stroke on either side. So I like the negative space that this creates by adding kind of edges onto my petals. Like so. A couple other techniques you can do is kind of daub on some darker color or some water while your petals are still wet to get a nice watercolor bleed effect. Of course, I'm a huge fan of. All right, so I'm going to do a few different of this same style with our pointy. The pointy style. Pointy style 5-point. That's the official name. We're going to do this one because it's at an angle. I have my center a little bit further up. The other thing is you remember that as you tilt and rotate flowers, different petals show at different angles. So I want to make sure that, like, if my flower is facing up, like a, let's see what flower would do that, an echinacea or like a black-eyed Susan, my petals would come down like that. That one would not be that long, not bad. It's okay. So we'd have something a little bit more like that. I'll do this one with our pointy as well. It's a little bit more of a flat facing view. So for this particular flower and for all the flowers I'm going to show today, I really aim for this negative space that you can see in here. To me, that's more of what makes a flower than having the entire thing painted in. I think having a solid petal, a totally solid petal, looks a little bit juvenile in its creation. Like we can do better than that. All right, so our next one is going to be 5 petal, but we're going to be rounded petals. I'm still going to do it with multiple brush strokes. So this one I'm creating a rounded edge rather than that pointed piece and leaving that middle still open. can't count. My bad. So has a pretty similar look. I mean, a petal's a petal, right? A flower's a flower, but I think when you have them in mass, the rounded petals look significantly different. You know, it's like splitting hairs, right? I think they have a less harsh look to them. Oh, that's a little bit much. And I'm going to do this one since it's a little bit more angled. Alright, last but not least, we're going to do my favorite ones, which are super similar. They are rounded as well, but I'm going to use 3 strokes to create them instead of 2 to 2.5. Like 3 very distinctive strokes. I like one in the middle. I'm still aiming for that negative space. Let's do a few more. Obviously, these can all have a very different look if you start to rotate your horizontal plane of your flower and look at it from a different angle, like the side, which we'll do a little bit here. And then these petals back here would be nice and little. We're also going to talk about leaves, and then we'll move on to roses in just a second. So I have a few different types of leaves I like as well. Generally speaking, I like my leaves to have a little bit of a rough edge to them. I think just like making a petal with 1 stroke feels a little bit juvenile to me, making a leaf with 1 stroke, 2 strokes feels a little pedestrian and boring. So I typically like to give my leaves a little bit of a wobble. Doctor. And of course, I love it when they run into other colors. So I always want to make sure that I'm hitting some of those wet summery yellows as well. So we do with a little bit less wobble on our stem. Versus leaves that look like a single stroke leaf that doesn't have a wobble. Can still be nice leaves. They just have a very different look. To me, it's a little bit boring. If we did a larger leaf, even with 2 strokes, I find that to be pretty boring. Versus a leaf that has a little bit more natural of a flow to it. Like those. So I always aim for a little bit of wobble. I just find it more interesting. Typically when I do paint entire pieces, like one sheet pieces that I very often will pattern a whole page, I do several layers of the same flower style. So I usually come in with a lighter color and then a darker color on top, to really give it some good depth and feeling to it. All right, I'm gonna switch paper. And let's take a look at some basic roses. I'm gonna switch out my paintbrush to a slightly bigger one. And mix up a little bit of red. All right, we've got some upper rose going on, some painfully bright pink. Make it a little bit peachier. That'll work. All right, so when I'm thinking of roses, you can draw a rose flat, kind of like we just did our 5-petal flowers and just do them one-dimensional. But because I tend to like to look at them a little bit on the tilt, I like that front petal to come up and show a little bit. So again, negative space is just as important as positive colored space. So I'm gonna start with my back petals. And then in my front, so depending upon how my rose is facing, my front petals are either going to be really thin or they're going to be turned up. So if we want thinner petals, they're kind of just tilted forward. Just going to give it a little bit of thinness, a little wispiness on the edges. Like that. And then we'll give it a center in the middle. If we want a turned up petal, I usually do one petal right across the bottom. So we still start with our back petals. And then we kind of do one on either side, one bigger one. Or we can do one across the middle. to make this petal look like we've got a turned up edge, once this dries a little bit, I'm gonna come in and add a lip to it. And then you can do it with any of your other ones up on the top where like the top petal has turned over a little bit. And it just gives it a little bit more dimension. It's a little bit more fun. When it comes to petals, I absolutely love the way red and green mix together. So we're gonna go ahead and add in some leaves in here. While we are wet, so our leaves and our petals can play together a little bit. If you're just joining, we are just doing kind of a basic little flower tutorial, nothing terribly exciting, but I've had several people ask for it in the last few days. Oh, thank you. Oh, did you change your handle name? If you're joining us on the YouTube portion of this tutorial, this video was originally shot as an Instagram Live. So we've got some comments and some questions as well. Feel free to ask any questions you guys have and I'll go over them. All right, so this is actually an interesting example of why when I'm doing a client project, I will swatch first. Because my Opera Rose, which I honestly don't usually use, it's one of my least favorite reds in the whole world, is separating a little bit from the sienna that I used. So in my roses, I don't know if you can actually see it, we've got a little bit of a separation between the reds and the oranges. So the peaches are kind of pulling away a little bit. I actually don't know if I mind, but that's something that you're gonna wanna know going into a piece, not coming out of a piece. So if I needed a true peach, this would not have worked. And because I love my reds to bleed into my greens, we're gonna just force it a little bit. Would you guys like me to finish our yellow one as a full page pattern or this one as a full page pattern? Taking a poll, taking a vote. Show you the yellow one. So the yellow one, we did 3 different styles of 5-petal flowers and little leaves. Just to see the yellow one. I think I've moved on to the pink one. I'm gonna finish this one because I like this one better. for yellow and one for red. Maybe we'll just do both. How about that? Oh, Swiss calligrapher. Are you actually Swiss from Switzerland? That's exciting. Some buds in here as well. If you're just joining us, we are doing some quick flower tutorials. We've got our 5-petal yellow section that we did at the beginning of the video, and we're doing just some pretty simple little roses now. If you are interested in this and you're missing it, you missed part of the live, I'm gonna throw the video up on YouTube when we're done, and you can catch it there. So I'm going to start doing some of our centers here, and then we'll be able to move on to adding in some of our leaf edges. So I am being cognizant of where my upturned leaf or my upturned petal would block the view of a center. And of course, most roses, you're not going to be able to really see that center. We're going to just go with these are wild roses. Because I like my flowers to have centers. I feel like it gives them a more distinctive weight. I have to decide which direction this guy is facing. I think it's facing this way, because it kind of just turned into a blob, but we will fix that when we add some depth to it. And I definitely would typically kind of do these as I go, because I want the yellows to bleed into my pinks. But that's okay. All right, let's get our smaller paintbrush. I'm going to dry it off a little bit just so I can pick up a little bit more pigmentation. And let's start adding in a little bit of detail with our edges. So this one here, I'm going to give a little bit of a turned up edge right along that side. And I typically will give my other petals just a tiny bit of an outline. Just give them a little bit more weight and a little bit more personality. like so. This one I'm going to separate into 2 petals. I've got one here and one here. Still a little bit wet, so my edges are going to bleed nicely into the rest of my flower. Pull the dog hair out of my brush. And similar to my leaves, I don't necessarily want my upturned petal to have a perfectly nice edge to it. I want it to be like a rose edge, which is going to be a little bit lacy and a little bit ruffly. And we're going to give one of these a little bit of an upturned, well, like a downturned petal here on top. So that's when like the top of the petal kind of dog ears over a little bit. Alright, now we've got this guy here that I need to decide what is happening because it just blobbed out on me. So we're gonna do one going this way here. And one on that side, and then we're gonna do this one as like the front faced petal. We're going to add one more layer of leaves in here as well, because I like to do my first layer light, my second layer darker. Splatter on my paper. Bummer. as always, one of the biggest and most helpful things you can do for yourself as an artist is to edit your work. Meaning, don't get discouraged if you don't like it right away. Walk away, come back to it later. Take a look at it later and see how you like it. Very, very often, most often, you're gonna come back and like it more after having let it set for a while. It's amazing how many dog hairs I have on my brushes. It's even more amazing that they're mostly dog and not cat. Especially given that the cat loves to sit on paintings. And paint and brushes. So I fix a leaf down in the corner, I definitely just put my hand on it. Oops. Can you guys hear the coffee machine firing up in the background? That's actually my hand is in that, sorry. Alright, so there's our basic roses and leaves. We also did our 5-petal. We did 3 different styles. We did the pointy guys up top, we did 2-stroke rounds and 3-stroke rounds. I did not add the center to these, but I will probably continue working on this and painting this and then post a picture of it. And if you guys missed the beginning, I am going to probably upload this to YouTube. I definitely did not hit record on the other camera in time, so we'll see about that. Alright guys, let me know if you have questions. You can always shoot me a message in my inbox and I will get to them on our next live. And if you're practicing, I would love for you to tag me at Design House of Moira so I can see your work and your progress. Everybody have a good afternoon.